I don't believe he said to his friends, my dad gets me. My dad understands me. He probably told him, my dad's a good guy. My dad loves me. We have a great relationship, but he doesn't really understand me. I could never share with him the fact that I'm not okay because he would talk me out of it and or try to talk me out of it.
Welcome to Normalize the Conversation by Inspiring My Generation. I'm your host, Francesca Reicherter. Today, I'm joined by John Trautwein, former professional baseball player, business leader, author, speaker, and co-founder of the Will to Live Foundation. After losing his 15-year-old son, Will, to suicide in 2010, John dedicated his life to helping families, schools, and communities have the conversations that can save lives. Through the foundation, he has helped fund suicide prevention programs in more than 3,000 schools and is the author of The Will to Live: How One Family Turned Tragedy into Healing, Hope, and Purpose. In this episode, we explore what every parent, educator, coach, and friend needs to know about creating conversations where people feel truly understood. We talk about the difference between loving someone and helping them feel seen, how to support someone who is struggling, and why small amounts of connection can have a lifelong impact. Join us as we normalize the conversation.
John, thank you so much for joining me. I'm really excited for our conversation after reading your book. It really brought up a lot of different conversations for me and my family, so I'm excited to get to dive deeper into this with you. But before we begin, I want to check in. How are you really?
So first of all, thanks so much for having me, Fran, and I'm doing great. I'm happy to be here. Whenever I get a chance to have a conversation like this, it brightens my day a little bit.
Yeah, okay, same. I get so excited to have these conversations because it's everything that I wish I had growing up that I didn't know I needed. Right? And I think back a lot before I record, before I talk to people about 12-year-old me who was lying under her bed, who didn't want to be here and was so afraid to tell anybody, who felt so alone in it and didn't know that it was okay to talk about it. So now, as an adult who's gone through so much, ended up in the psych unit, and saw how many of us needed these conversations, it makes my day a million times better to start with the conversation that I always needed.
As you know, you are not one in a million, you're one of millions. And I think what's really important about these kind of conversations is not only are there so many other teenagers and young adults that, were in that or are in that same situation that you were in a few years back, but there's also so many parents who are just like me, who are uneducated and unaware around mental illness. And as a result, these conversations don't take place because neither one feels comfortable doing it, just for lack of understanding and lack of awareness. So I've sort of dedicated my life to, no longer being one of those parents, because I was one of those parents. And 15 years ago, if somebody would have told me that my son was struggling in any way, shape, or form, I would have been offended. If someone would have said he had depression or a mental illness, I would have told him to back off. You don't know anything about my son. My son's fine. Look at him. He's big. He's strong. He's healthy. He's a Trautwein. We're doing great. Back off, right? But because I was unaware and uneducated, I didn't listen. I didn't think it affected me or my family or my world, and I was completely wrong.
I think that it's so common to think that, our kid is masking, right? They're smiling, they have a lot of things going for them and people around them. Of course they're okay. How could anyone think they're not okay? And I know for me, that was a big thing with my parents. They're like, you're always so bubbly. You're always so bubbly and always smiling and laughing and doing so much. I never would have thought that you were going through anything. And it was the late nights and early mornings hiding under my bed, crying and hiding so that my parents wouldn't hear it. Because I didn't know that it was okay to not be bubbly because that's who everyone thought I was and saw me as.
Right.
So now who I have to be so that everyone else is okay. And when my parents ended up visiting me in the psych unit, it was the first time that they were like, what are you feeling? Right? What is it behind those smiles? It was the first time they could see in my eyes that there wasn't much behind them anymore. And that made such a difference in knowing it was reactive. And I think that's a big thing, right? It becomes reactive that we start having these conversations. And I so appreciate people like you who are now teaching parents, teaching kids, right? The life teammates. I love that, by the way, to have that support, to have these conversations, to really show up for people, because you don't know until you get to that moment.
It's so interesting. And the other thing that's just so it hit me between the eyes, right? You talked about, depression, is often very maskable. And that was the situation with my son. My 15-year-old son was like you. He was the leader of his friends. He was the star athlete. He was a musician. He was popular. He was successful in all walks of life. He was considered the consultant of his friends. Yet he didn't have the strength to say, I'm not okay, or the courage, and the awareness that he was not alone in feeling this way. I don't believe he said to his friends, my dad gets me. My dad understands me. He probably told them, my dad's a good guy. My dad loves me. We have a great relationship, but he doesn't really understand me. I could never share with him the fact that I'm not okay, because he would talk me out of it, or try to talk me out of it. And he's right. And it's this this is where this concept of mental illness, Fran, is so different than any other illness. Nobody's embarrassed to have an awful illness like cancer. You're not embarrassed by it. But you are embarrassed if you have a mental illness. You don't want anybody to think that there's something wrong mentally. And I'm a whack job, I'm crazy, I'm a loony, right? And so this stigma that comes with it prohibits us from being comfortable about admitting, I'm John Trautwein and I have a mental illness, and I love that about me. People really don't say that. And I think this is what was so interesting as I went through my journey of understanding how I could lose my son, who grew up in a happy, healthy, loving home and lost the will to live, but we didn't understand. And so had Will told me what you told your parents that night, if he would have told me that in the living room, I would not have believed him. I would have, oh, Will, come on. And I would have tried to talk him out of it, because I didn't know what depression was. I didn't know what mental illness was. I didn't realize it was a physical illness. It's not a character flaw, and it's not a choice. And so now I listen a little bit more. I listen to the silence. And it's a very, it's just so important to understand that life is hard. And we just can't assume that, we are okay. I started the Will to Live Foundation really as a way to improve lives. People say, oh, you're trying to reduce suicides. I said, yeah, I guess. But what I'm really trying to do is improve the will to live, because life is hard. Your kids have it harder than you did. And they might argue. And then I'll say, did you have a cell phone when you were 12? When you were 10, when you were 15, when you were 18? Did you have a cell phone when you were 25? And the answer is no. What comes with this is unlike anything we had to grapple when we were that age. And it was very eye-opening for me. Just once, I wish I would have said to my son, wow, this sucks. I didn't have to do this. I didn't have to get straight A's to go to college. I didn't have to make a travel team. I was a Major League Baseball player. I would not make my high school team growing up today, because I wouldn't have made the travel team when I was 10. I never once thought of that. Isn't it nice to hear from someone like me to say, wow, this is really hard. I didn't have to do that. How can I help? As opposed to, hey, Will, isn't this great? Isn't this awesome? Isn't this wonderful? I didn't have this. This is so cool. I wish I was you. just once I wish I would have said, I didn't have to do this. Well, this is really hard. Sorry, brother. And maybe he would have opened up a little bit because he had a parent that understood what he was facing on a daily basis, because I certainly didn't until after he was gone.
You know, when I read about that in the book, I immediately texted my dad the link to buy the book. And I was like, you need to read this because I talk to him all the time about it feels like every decision in life is so permanent because if you mess up, the world's going to know about it and it's going to be on the internet for the
Yeah,
rest
yeah,
of time.
yeah.
It's a long out survive you. And that's terrifying to me. I am so terrified to do something wrong and not be able to recover because there isn't a lot of room for growth and mistakes anymore. People judge you by one moment and decide that's who you are for the rest of your life.
Everything you do is recorded. I didn't have that. So think of that, right? I didn't have everything I did wasn't recorded for the whole world to see and judge. And today it is, and it makes it very, very hard. And so just understanding that enables us to perhaps talk about it more, right? Because it is okay to not be okay. In fact, it's expected. So don't worry about that. In fact, I'd be worried about you if you were always perfect, right? Because we're not okay. Life is hard, and it's one of the traits of being a human is that we're far from perfect.
And that's exactly how I describe my dad all the time. Like, I know he loves me so much and he would move heaven and earth for me. I also know that as soon as I text him that I'm feeling really alone and my heart hurts so much inside, that's how I describe my depression. And
Right, right.
I'm terrified of that pain. He's like, well, what do you have to be sad about? Look how good your life is. I didn't have this when I was your age. And he's trying to be encouraging and motivating, right? Like, look at all you have going for you. And that's one thing I'm still working on with him. But it's that feeling of understanding. So, for someone like my dad, or so many dads out there, right? How did you begin to shift to, or even learn the language?
When I talk to the parents, I open up by saying, this is really important, guys. You are listening to tonight, you're listening to not a psychologist, not a psychiatrist, not a doctor, not a medical expert. You are listening to a dad who's just like you, who 15 years ago would not have come to this session tonight because he was uneducated and unaware about mental illness and depression and the fact that it's everywhere, that 1 in 5 of us in this room, parents, 1 in 5 of you, 1 in 5 of everyone you know in your life, 1 in 5 of the kids in your world are suffering from some form of a diagnosable mental illness that is treatable and beatable and common. And I'm not telling you that your kid is suicidal. If your parents would have said to you, gosh, Fran, are you worried about, do you have friends in your world that you're worried about and that might be, depressed or maybe worse, even suicidal, things like that? Or do you ever think this way? At least you would have thought, okay, they know it's real. They know it's an option. And now they're opening the door that I can talk about it. And you can say, well, actually, I think about it all the time, Mom. And it just leads to this discussion now that mental illness is real and 1 in 5 of us have it and it is okay. And if we can just start this conversation, that stigma weakens. And that's really where we're trying to get to, where, create this culture in our community where it's okay to not be okay. And we're going to talk about it because life is hard and we relate. And this peer-to-peer understanding is what Life Teammates message is all about. Who really understands what it's like to be a young adult today than another young adult? It certainly isn't your parents, right? So it's a different world, right? And so it was just, and I didn't, you can't compare it. So we shouldn't assume that we understand it. So let them talk, we can listen and just, add some support, add some guidance. I think some of the best parenting I ever did was when I said, I don't know. And that was hard for me. It's hard for mom and dad to say, I don't know. We have all the answers. Will was the oldest of four kids. So my other three kids got a different John than Will did. And as a result, I think they do say, yeah, dad's still clueless, but dad does understand. They open up to me. We talk more than I did with Will.
Yeah. I really like the idea of hearing someone else's story as a way to open the conversation, because had my parents known that it was okay to use the word suicide, to use the word depression, right, when talking to me and asking these questions, I think that
Yeah.
it makes it less isolating and scary. When my parents use the words now, I'm like, okay, I know I can talk to them about it because they're not afraid of the words. They're not afraid of the emotions and the feelings. And that's such a big shift.
Sure.
And when I try to talk to him about how isolated I feel or how scared I am to post online, but I have to post online, right? And my dad's like, well, I became successful as an entrepreneur without it. It's not that hard. I'm like, very different world. And
Yeah.
if I talk to people, when I start talking to people around my age who are doing it, and that fear of posting online and how can we support each other, right? What does it feel when you're sitting on the floor of your apartment trying to figure out how to get people to listen, to donate, to want to show up and support you? It makes such a difference when I talk to people who are in it in that same life moment as I am. It suddenly doesn't feel so isolating.
I think the challenge that you have and the challenge that we all have is right. There's areas of your dad's resume that you can and should learn from, right? Take that and apply it to today's world, right? And it's different, but it's possible. And I think that way, and that's a good conversation to your dad, is to say, okay, here's what I'm facing. I love what you did back then, but I can't do that now. So how could I do something like that using today's form of media rather than advertising in a magazine that doesn't exist anymore? Right now, it's all about social media, things like that. So I think this is where it becomes a challenge. Both parties put themselves in each other's shoes, right? You can kind of understand that. And I say to kids all the time, right? We just love you and we do what we learned like from our parents, which was even further back in time, right? And so we don't assume we know what we're doing, but if we work it out together, it becomes a little bit more fun. And that's where it's really hard. And when you talk to other entrepreneurs who are your age and going through the challenges that you're facing, those kind of things, right? But it won't work unless we all come to the conclusion that it's different. See, I think I say it in the book, right? I saw Will's eyes through my 1980 eyes. But what I didn't see is the pressures that come with these opportunities that's, that are reaching us at such a younger age. That's the challenge I give to parents. We can't assume we know what's going on in their world. And that's okay. Encourage them to talk to other people. But by talking about it, the stigma starts to decrease. It becomes a little bit more normal. And that's why we formed the Will to Live Foundation, to try to get kids to recognize the understanding they have in each other so they would talk about it. And once that happens, it becomes a little bit more normal. And boy, do we need that. Because you didn't feel normal, did you? Going through that. You felt alone. And that's how Will was. And that's what breaks our hearts, right? So I'm thrilled to talk to you in this way.
And it shows how any conversation can connect to mental health, mental illness, whether it's talking to your kid about their phones and how it makes them feel, or social media, or school, right? That feeling of, am I good enough? Is it going to get better? Can I make it? Can come from any avenue of one's life. So whether my dad is talking to me about business and I'm on the floor crying because I don't know if I'm going to make it, if I'm doing the right things, or if it was my dad talking to me or my mom talking to me when I was in high school, right? When I was on the floor crying because of calculus, right? Am I going to be smart enough? Am I going to get into college? Is my whole life going to be over tomorrow? Or when I was being bullied by people, right? Am I ever going to be good enough? Am I ever going to have friends? right? All of these really big, the world is ending thoughts could come from anywhere. So any conversation, opening the avenues for just that space to talk about fears, pain, shame, guilt, any of it makes such a difference. And it doesn't matter what stage you are at in life, right? So
Sure.
just starting conversations that are age appropriate, but at every age throughout our life matters. And letting you know that you can talk to your friends about it too, because they're probably feeling alone in it and are afraid to talk about it. So if you open the conversation, together you can feel supported. And that's what I really loved about, life teammates, right? It's you're gonna have these people, and these people you meet so young, just talk about them, talk about it, create that relationship that's really deep. You'll have that for a lifetime. It's really your life teammates.
When Will died, you know, my life teammates, my high school friends showed up from all over the country in 2 days' notice. Some of them I hadn't spoken to in 30 years, but they were there. And these were the friends that I did learn about life with. I was there when my girlfriend dumped me or when their girlfriend dumped them, right? That kind of thing. We were together. We learned, we shared our first together. We understood each other. And they ended up being in my wedding. They were also godparents to my kids. My life friends, that's where this life teammate concept came. It was at Will's funeral when I was seeing these guys. Oh, I met them when I was a teenager. Had if I can get the teenagers of today to recognize two things. One, they have already met some of life's greatest friends that will be there for them through all the wonderful things, the guys that they're and gals that they're going to call when they get into college or they get their first job or they get engaged or they get married or they have children, whatever it might be, right? So if I can get you to recognize you've already met these people. People call me all the time. I'm worried about my son. I'm worried about my daughter. I do two things. Take it seriously. They need professional help. Will took his life. Okay. Sorry. Take it seriously. Can you get them to be that life teammate that delivers hope to someone else? Because if you can, their problems start to diminish. They've done something good. They've helped somebody else, right? So I always talk about, drop a love you man on a friend, you'll feel better. And of course, the receiver of all of those is going to feel better. But don't underestimate the power you have to deliver hope to yourself by being a source of hope to a friend. That's what a life teammate is. Just these little things, these little, life by 1,000 smiles. But if you're the source of somebody else's smile, that's going to improve your will to live and shows you that you have the ability to positively impact Earth, right? This craziness that we have today. So it's a very positive message, Fran. And I think that's where, when people look at me like, wow, how are you doing this? I'm like, I'm telling people to love each other. I'm telling people to be there for each other. I'm telling people to be the source of hope for each other. This is a positive thing. And it's the result of a tragedy. But isn't it a better place when we're talking and we're empathetic? There's a crazy world right now. And I think this concept of being the source of hope and the source of love and the source of strength really does help you. And when you are struggling, go where the love is. Go where those people are that you can talk to. And I often say things, going where the love is also to give yourself Fran time, right? Sometimes you just need to, if you like to play the piano, right? If you like to read. If you like to run. Do something for yourself each day. And I'm giving myself John time, because if you don't, life will get in the way. And next thing you know, it's midnight and you haven't done it and you're going to bed and tomorrow's a crazy day and it just repeats. And now weeks and months go by and you love to play the guitar, but you haven't played your guitar in 2 months. That's a problem, right? Go where the love is a great way to think about it, but give yourself your time and don't just try to please the world 24/7.
I love two main things I want to touch on. So first, that feeling of getting to help people, that's been what's kept me going. It gave me this sense of purpose, like I have some value to offer the world. When my brain was telling me every reason I wasn't good enough, every reason the world would be better without me, every small act of kindness, every moment I volunteered, anything that I did that made someone else smile, I was like, okay, I'm doing something.
Love it.
I'm
Yeah.
not bad, right? And that helped so much with my brain to understand that even when my thoughts feel overwhelming and terrifying, and I am convincing myself of why I shouldn't be here, every single day I'm doing at least one thing to give myself that feeling of purpose and value. So I love volunteering and helping people. And maybe you don't have these really big things and energy that you could do, but maybe it's sending a thank you text to a friend or writing a card and telling them how much they mean to you, right? It's all these small things that we can do. And it makes such a difference in increasing our will to live. And then the second piece is, for me, for so long, it was so hard to, if I made a friend who then wasn't a friend, I was like, okay, I have no one. It took so long to realize that you will find these life teammates and you will meet other people along the way who maybe aren't. Don't let that take away from that community and that friendship that you really do have. You said, go where love is. The difficult ones, the challenging ones, don't take away from the ones that bring love. And that's something I wish I knew so much earlier in life.
You said something that jumped out at me. You said the small things, right? Um, when you're in that state, when you're in a depressed state, when you're in a grieving state, don't underestimate the power of the small things. When Will died, I didn't know how I was going to get out of bed, but for some reason, my senses were sort of on overload, and was I was picking out these small little acts of kindness, these small wonders, and these little things. And I started noticing little acts of kindness that my 11-year-old lacrosse teammates were doing for him. Just little things. Just, hey, Mikey, um, just wanted to let you know I heard the song. It reminded me of Will, and I thought I would just call you and tell you that I love you. That's a little thing, right? That the human spirit craves companionship comes into play, right? That's in the book, right? And it's so much more impactful than how was your day? What did the teacher say? How was the test? All that kind of stuff that, we just want to know because we love you. We want to know how your day was, right? And it's so much more impactful than, how was school today? And, so sharing, right? For parents to share their problems or share their challenges and share their world, the kids appreciate it, and they feel like they know you a little bit better, and it might encourage the kids to bring up a subject that they in the past wouldn't have. And I think this is really where it's so, yeah, there's nothing that good that comes from this talking, even if it's a difficult conversation. At least you're showing, I understand that you are going through something that you believe is really, really hard. I want you to know I understand that. I may not understand the issue. I may not agree with the issue, but I understand that it's really hard and it's really hurting you. And I'm here. So let's see if we can talk it through somehow.
Yeah.
As opposed to, oh, that happened to me and everything's fine. Because that's what typical dads do. And that's what I did to Will. His girlfriend broke up with him. I said, oh, yeah, that happened to me. Happened to me a couple of times. We're fine. Look at your mom. She's hot. Right. And he laughed. And I thought, okay, I'm doing what fathers should do. I'm there. I'm making it okay. I'm making it okay right now. And I wish I would have just said, wow, sorry, dude. I know that sucks. You all right? How can I help? As opposed to having a solution right then and right there.
Just being there. And, the idea of how was your day? Some kids are so talkative, and maybe that will open a big conversation. Maybe one kid will volunteer the information. Maybe another kid will really need you to volunteer information first, right? Meeting your kids where they're at is so important. and learning who they are so they can learn who they are, right? Every kid is different. So how can we really just meet them where they are so they know that they're not alone?
It's really, really powerful what you just said and the way you said it, right? We need to try to figure out where they are. We need to meet them there and don't necessarily try to bring them to where we are because we're nowhere near them, right? And when you're talking about parents, right? So that's really, really powerful stuff that you're saying here. So keep saying it because it's, you're in that situation where, you have been there, right? You have been, and these are the little things that got you through, right? So think of so you have a lot of knowledge there and just keep writing it down.
Thank you. Yeah, one thing that really made such a difference my mom didn't know how to talk about emotions with me, but she knew that I love Taylor Swift. So she went and to her, it was nails on a chalkboard. But she sat there and made a point to listen to every single song, every album, go through it, and then ask me what song was my favorite song that day. Because then she could understand the lyrics and what I was feeling. Right. And that became a way for her to be able to begin conversations with me. It was literally meeting me where I was at. And that was the best way that I could explain my feelings, right? Was the lyrics of a song. So it's just finding those small things that I'm sure my mom didn't enjoy in the beginning. Now she's a Swiftie, so go mom. But, right, like,
Oh, that's great. No, that's powerful right there.
yeah.
And understanding, trying to understand what motivates you, right, is what she did.
Yeah.
And knowing that if she can, yeah, that's brilliant.
Yeah. And to this day, when I go home, I get very overstimulated because there's so many people and so much happening. She puts on the Eras tour and we just sit and have it on in the background or we're watching it. But it's something she knows makes me feel good. And that's just been so helpful. So it's just small things that she saw mattered to me, that she saw helped me, and found ways to incorporate them. And I think that's the best thing we can do is listen, is really just listen to understand. I think for so many parents, right, they're so afraid that, if what if I did something wrong? What if it's my fault? What if that, even when you didn't know what to do, you found
No parent ever says, oh, it was me because their daughter got cancer. My son died of an illness, not of bad parenting. He died of an illness that went unchecked because I was uneducated and unaware. But I give myself a little bit of a pass because nobody was educated or aware, right? And so this is really hard. And I remember when Robin Williams died, I got interviewed, and the guy said, "How about Robin Williams, John? Here's a guy who had it all. He had fame, he had fortune, he had money, he had a family, he had kids. Like, what a cowardly act! I can't get to grips with it." I said, "You don't get it. Robin Williams battled every day. He battled an awful illness, and for years he made people laugh while he was battling this awful illness that eventually took his life. He was no coward." This is the problem. No one gets mad at George Harrison for dying of cancer, but they get mad at Robin Williams for taking his life because they don't associate that necessarily that he had an illness that he fought and fought and fought. And it eventually, just like cancer, people fight and fight and fight. And unfortunately, it eventually takes us. And that's what happened there. So, this is something that's just so important. That's a great, something where you make sure your mom and dad are aware that it's not because of them that you had the illness. Now, not talking about it makes it worse. So creating a culture where you do talk about it can help it, right? That's what she did by watching and listening and reading all the Taylor Swift lyrics. I love that story. That's a great story.
right.
That's really great.
I really appreciate that so much
You have
more.
a book here, Fran. I hope you're writing one. Your story is a good one, and you have a good way of portraying it in these little. People need these little nuggets, right? I always say, it's these little base hits. Let's have a great life today.
Yeah.
And the beauty of it, we get another one tomorrow. And just so look for those little things that made today a good one. Even though there's a bunch of crap that happened today, there's also this conversation for me. This is a good one today, right? And I think that's really where, you know, I'm going to have a great life today, and then the sun's going to come back up tomorrow, and we do it again. And I don't worry about the future like I used to. Fran. Make today a good one. It has a way of the future has a way of ironing itself out, right? And I think that's really important.
Yeah, and that's something that brings so much, I mean, the uncertainty, right? Brings so much anxiety, so much fear, so
Yeah,
much worry. And that's why these conversations matter because so many people feel
yeah.
like they're the only one. So, as we're wrapping up, how can people learn more about you, the Will to Live Foundation, connect, volunteer, donate?
Yeah. So, if you search for us, the Will to Live Foundation on Google, whatever, you'll see us. It's willtolive.org. My book that just came out, The Will to Live, is available anywhere you buy books. I started writing it a year after Will died, but there were so many little things that had happened in that first year that I actually kept a journal because I didn't want to forget them. And then over the course as the foundation started, and we had these wonderful, experiences of delivering hope, teens delivering hope to each other through this Life Teammates thing. I thought I have a lot of really powerful things here, and even in the darkest days, there's there's hope throughout those little chapters.
Thank you so much for listening to Normalize the Conversation. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. This podcast is an initiative of Inspiring My Generation, focusing on normalizing the conversation, bringing education and awareness to the forefront, and amplifying global voices to spark change and hope. Inspiring My Generation is a 501(c)(3) nonprofit organization on a mission towards suicide prevention through awareness, conversation, education, and support. Connect with us on Instagram at Inspiring My Generation and visit our website inspiringmygeneration.org to learn more about our work and how you can make a difference.